Okay, so when we last left off, we had added our container fluid, which again is we had added a div with the class container fluid to our page. We made sure that it was encompassing all of the content on our page, right? All of the divs, all of the material that we currently have visible. Now, if we reload the page, we're probably not going to see a whole lot happen. There was a tiny shift in, you can see. Because one of the things that Bootstrap does is it applies margins. But in order to actually sort of get our content organized, we need to designate rows. We need to designate rows of content. So essentially content that is all going to be roughly the same height, that we want to appear next to each other on larger devices, and then what proportional width of the page is to take up. So again, remember that we're always thinking of this as being 12 columns. And so what we'll say is, well, on a medium to large size device, we want this to take up, 6 columns and this to take up 6 columns. That's how we get them to appear next to each other, right? And then in the next row, we might begin our articles. So we might say, okay, well, we have 2 articles. We want them to appear next to each other. Now, as the page scales down, we might want them to stack, right? So that's where we'll say, well, actually, when it's extra small, I want, I want each of these to take up all of the space and wrap next to each other. So it's a little bit difficult to consider this in the abstract. So the easiest thing for us to do is to just use an example. So so on the Bootstrap website, they have an example of for this mobile and desktop layout. And this is not to say that, this is necessarily the final layout we want to go with, but it gives us a way to experiment with how these look. So what I am going to do, I can actually use this button. What I find easiest with this is I don't ever worry about trying to write the divs and then add the content immediately. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paste this content onto my page, and then I'm going to paste this material onto my page, and then I'm going to move my existing content into piece by piece to see how it behaves until I decide on something that I think works. So I am going to get rid of my H1 here, and I'm just going to paste in all of this extra stuff. So let me do a source format in here. So you can see it's now spread this out a little bit, so we can see essentially what's happening here. So we see that it, and it's given us some nice commenting to help us understand what's happening. So if I go back to the front of my page here and I reload it, I'm going to see their stuff in there. And so now the question is, how do I want my material to be laid out? So I think that what I'm going to do is say, well, I want to have, I'm going to put just each of these visualizations into, I'm going to put each of these visualizations into their own div. So I'm going to come back over here and say, okay, well, let's make the first row the visualization. So I'll take one div for the visualization, and I'm going to put it in here. And I'm going to take the other visualization div, and I'm going to put it in here. Let's see what effect that has. Okay, so now we see something interesting has happened, because if I look back at the classes, again, the whole width of this page is 12 columns. And I said, well, listen, on a medium-sized device, this right-hand one should take up 4 columns, and this left-hand one should take up 8 columns. So that's why I have all this white space here, right? If I adjust this, we can see that it now pops nicely into place. I probably want to change the width of this div so it doesn't look quite so funny. But it now pops into place nicely underneath the other visualization. I can do a similar thing with my stories. So I am going to, for the time being, I'll go ahead and stick with this, I'll stick with that format. So I could use these other ones. I'll just stick with this 8 and 4 for the sake of simplicity. Right, so I'm going to now duplicate this row, right? And I always am organizing my material into rows. So obviously I'm not going to put chart 1 and chart 2 in there. Instead, I'm going to put my article container class, my article container div, right? Which has all of the material from my first story, and I'm going to do the same thing with my second one. Oops, cut that out. And I'm going to put it, so I'm getting rid of this, and I'm going to put this in here. And let's just, again, this is not, I'm not promoting this as the best layout, but this just gives us a way to explore how these things behave. So now we see we have 12 on the left and 4 on the right. And as we scale this page, they sort of pop into place, right? So this is obviously just the beginning. You'll also notice that there are some issues here with, I have material that's overrunning my page, so I really can't, it's not a great fit, if you will, what's happening here, because we want to make sure that, we obviously want to make sure that we're not cutting off our material. So I might revise this and say, okay, maybe I'm going to do a 6 and a 6, because actually, although visually it's not that interesting, the content that I have here doesn't work very well in this layout. Or perhaps what I'll do is I'll say, okay, I'll put an article on one side and then I'll have a visualization in the 4 column on the other one. So maybe I'll do that instead. I think that might work a little bit better. So in that case, now this is where it starts to get tricky. So I'm going to go ahead and format again. Okay, so I can now see a little bit more clearly. Okay, so I don't actually want this article in the smaller bit. I want to put it, I'm going to go ahead and put it in the top bit here, and I'm going to make this chart 1 div. And so now what I'm doing is I'm putting my visualizations in the smaller category, in the smaller set of columns. Right, again, my format here will help me understand how to do it, and hopefully that will look a little bit nicer. So that works a little bit better, right? We can see now, of course, this visualization isn't very tall, but again, if we were to scale this up, or say scale this down, right, it's now sort of wrapping all of that stuff in together. So again, this is a very rudimentary example, but it starts to get towards the idea of, you know, what can we do to make our page as responsive and usable as possible for our various audiences. I'm going to demonstrate a couple of other features that Bootstrap has is going to help us. Now, I recognize that the page that we're looking at right now doesn't look very good, and we'll continue to work with Bootstrap. Obviously, this is sort of what I have here is sort of an amalgamation of exercises. So probably once we return from spring break, we'll be starting with scratch, looking at your final projects, and this will start to make a lot more sense and look much more professional. But just so you have a sense of what some of the possibilities are, I want to highlight a couple of other features of Bootstrap. Specifically, there is some things that we can do around images. So there is a class called Image Responsive that will, in general, automatically scale images for us. So if you recall, when we were working on our images for our stories, we included styles that did things like set the width of the divs, the article container. So for example, our article container, we are setting a width there that is 600 pixels, and then the image, our images are responding to that size. If, for example, I were to remove the width here, I would probably get something that looks, and also I'm going to add the class Image Responsive. Right, now again, this class is one that is defined in the Bootstrap CSS. So once again, we're taking advantage of work that's been done by others here to bring our page's usability up. So let's see what happens when we do that. So if I come here, now you can see, now I don't have a lot of text here, that actually it's rendering. So my headline is actually extending all the way out, and it makes a little bit more sense what's happening when I'm adjusting this page now. And then of course we see that this has popped down here. Likewise, I want to emphasize that we can also do this thing where we swap out one element for another. And the place that this is particularly going to be relevant is when we're switching again from a desktop view to a mobile view. And to do this, we're going to, again, we're all using all classes that are already defined in Bootstrap CSS, and there are, hundreds of classes, right? So we're being a little bit selective in the ones that we look at here. If we look at responsive utilities, I have these classes called hidden and visible. And basically what I can do is I can use this to create two separate divs within a row that are kind of mutually exclusive in the way that they're displayed. So essentially, what I'm going to do in this case, if I come back to my page, I just want to demonstrate that right now when this squeezes down, we can see that it goes from the top right under to appearing underneath this. And there we go. And there's our responsive image scaling there, right? But what if I don't actually want the same visualization to appear? What if I want it to be a completely different visualization? So I'm going to demonstrate this by first just testing that I can get this to disappear and something else to appear when it's really small. And then of course I can switch my content up. So let me go ahead and come back here. So here's where my chart is appearing. Okay, and what I'm going to do is say, okay, I'm going to copy this so I get another one, right? And I'm going to put some test content and say, this should be, I'm just going to put in some text, visible only if small, actually extra small. Okay, and now I'm going to say, okay, this one I only want to have appear, I want it to be 6 columns on an extra small display. And I want to say that this one that has my chart is only this medium-sized 4 column, okay? That's not quite enough. I also have to add some additional classes from the Bootstrap that says, look, this is either hidden, this is hidden in all of the cases where, other than the one that I want it to be visible, right? Which I realize sort of a little counterintuitive, but basically, or I should be able to actually say this, visible extra small asterisk. So I want the one that is going to be visible, right, to appear only when the screen is extra small. And I need to specify that this one should disappear when it's extra small. So I can say, in this case, I can say, hidden extra small. Okay, I find this this part I have to be honest, I find pretty tricky, just sort of keeping everything straight. But basically I'm saying I want this to be hidden when it's extra small, and I want this to be visible only when it's extra small. And hopefully what I will see is when I reload my page that I still get this, that's what I expect. And what I'm hoping is that once I get down to extra small, there we go. So you see now that this is just this text, right? But my chart has disappeared completely. So this is, I realize, not the most compelling example, but what it demonstrates is that I can have the content that I put in this second, in that additional div, right, could actually be a completely different chart, right? One that might be more suitable to a mobile view, for example. So hopefully this has gotten you a little bit excited about the possibilities of adding multiple charts to our pages and also starting to think about the overall layout, which of course is going to be important as you think about your final projects, which are going to be targeted towards a news organization. And part of what you'll be doing is replicating the style and layout of that news organization using our CSS. So that's all for this week. I look forward to seeing you all on Tuesday, and until then, have a good weekend.